After 15 years in the analytics space and 100 plus clients, I've seen one pattern repeated consistently across almost every single company. People tend to start at the wrong step when it comes to data analysis. Reports and dashboards are important, of course, but they're not the first step. The very first thing you should do before you analyze any data is determine what is the decision that's actually being made here. In this video, I'll break down the full data analysis process I use, from decisions to insights, so you can avoid the traps that most beginners fall into. Because without the right foundation, it's easy to drown in data and completely miss the story that it's trying to tell you. Let's dive in. Hello everyone, my name is Ruben. I have published 2 commercial books and helped 100 plus organizations with their data stacks. And on this channel, I show you how to do the same through practical tutorials and smart strategy. Let's dive into the video. Let's start at the top of the data analysis process. Step 1 is asking yourself, what is the decision that is being made here? Sometimes people talk about what are the questions that need to be answered. I think a focus on decisions makes more sense because data can be used to answer almost any question out there. Someone may say, hey, why do we have more customers in California than Texas? Or why are our customers mostly purchasing on iOS versus Android devices? But the answers may actually not be relevant or useful at all. You may not do anything with that answer. So you may not choose to tweak your campaigns to focus more on California or to perhaps put more resources onto iOS. Doesn't mean that's right or wrong. It just means that the answer may lead nowhere. So instead of just answering random questions, we want our data analysis process to help support a tangible decision that will be made. There's a team of people. It may be your boss, it may be your team, maybe another team, and they are needing your help to make a decision, and data will play a role in that. This also means that if you get brought in for the data analysis process and you start to ask, what is the decision being made, you may all discover as a group that there's actually no decision being made. You're all just wasting your time. You're looking for answers to questions that are actually not important at this point in time, and you may table the entire project altogether, which is fine. The point here is to help drive a decision forward, not just answer random questions with data, which you can do at any time. So here's an example of a decision that was brought to me a few months ago. A client was spending $10,000 a month on Facebook ads, and they were wondering, should we keep this amount? Should we increase it, perhaps to $20,000, or should we decrease it to $5,000? What do? We need to make this decision. We need some kind of data to help us guide this decision. And of course, we're going to merge the data with other sources, like the qualitative knowledge we have and the experience. But this is the decision being made. What do we do about our monthly Facebook ads budget? And if we do change it, what do we change it to? So having this frame now guides everything. We know what the outcome is, the decision being made. So we can start to figure out what are the actual metrics, data, and so on that we can put together to get to that outcome, not just answer some random question. Step 2, what data do you need and from where? Now we start to collect the things that we're going to work on, the building blocks, the raw materials. Now, in the case of the client for Facebook ads, it means that we most likely have to start by looking at the existing Facebook campaigns. We want to be able to say, okay, based on what's running right now, what does the clicks look like, the impressions, the click-through rate, conversions, which in this case were trials. So how many trials are being attributed to Facebook? We also had subscribers, which are users basically that completed the trial successfully and became a paying subscriber 7 days after. So we have a bunch of metrics or data points, would be more accurate at this stage, that we need to collect from somewhere, and we need to store it and probably modify it and then run queries or some kind of analysis on. But first, of course, we just want to understand the data and where it comes from. We may also have some qualitative numbers. So the marketing team actually had some data as to, hey, the users who come from Facebook are typically like this. Here's the profile. Here are the things they do compared to other users. We find them to be a little more flaky, not as committed. They don't really know our brand compared to users who found us organically, and so forth. So those data points may also become relevant later on, and we just want to make a note of that and know, hey, here's the 3 or 4 or 5 data sources and that we may be using for the data analysis, and of course, to help guide the decision from step 1. Now, small note on the actual logistics of how you actually pull data. It can vary a lot depending on your data sources. It may be as simple as just exporting some kind of CSV. You put that into Excel. You may have different tabs in Excel, and you run all your analysis by just building formulas and having some kind of final tab with your numbers. That's completely fine. The point here is not to be as showy as possible or to use the most complex tools out there. It's just to get to the metrics and the data that will help guide that decision. Now, I do want to show you how I approach this in case you're curious. I actually use a tool called Funnel.io. There's lots of tools to do this, so you don't have to use this one particular tool. There's lots of alternatives, Supermetrics, and there's several others. But effectively, what Funnel.io is built for is actually this exact use case. You're pulling data from ad platforms and a bunch of other sources. It will kind of normalize the data for you and clean it. We're going to see action step 3 being relevant, and then we can send this somewhere, whether that is Google Sheets, or in my case, I actually use BigQuery, which is a data warehouse. So I took all the data from Facebook for the last 12 months, and I took, there were maybe 25, 30 metrics broken down by campaign, broken down by ad set, broken down by the ad itself, and the other metrics that we talked about, the clicks, the impressions, the conversions. So took all that through Funnel, and then Funnel sent it to BigQuery, a data warehouse, where I then perform some SQL queries in the next step. Again, this is kind of elaborate, it's kind of sophisticated, kind of fancy, you might say. You don't need to do this, but this may also be a helpful point to think about sustainability. That is, if you think you're going to have to repeat this in 6 months or 12 months, you may want to think about some kind of flow of data that will be repeatable in the future, or it may actually just be ongoing. So in this case, I knew that the team would benefit from being able to look at some of this Facebook data numbers going forward if we do stick with it. So might as well look for some options that can provide us with an automated way to report on data after. Again, it's not necessary. And if you go and look for tools out there, this is typically like ETL tools, extract, transform, and load, where you're pulling data from a bunch of sources, which may be ad platforms or Google Analytics or really anywhere else. And then you take them somewhere else, which again could be a data warehouse, or could be as simple as a Google Sheets, or as even simpler as a CSV. This is sort of like we're going to point A to point B. So look for the right tools to help you do the job. Don't get too sophisticated, but do keep in mind that if it's something you want to repeat, you may want something that's a little bit more automated or more persistent than just doing something in Excel. Step number 3, how do you prepare the data for analysis? So we have our data wherever you have it, whether it's in a data warehouse, Google Sheets, Excel, you have it somewhere. Now, there needs to be some preparation to the data. So here's some of the things to keep in mind as you go through this step. First, you want to normalize the names of columns. This is always handy. So you may have, for example, 3 data sources, and the first one may have a column that's called campaign name. The second one has a column that's called campaign, and the third one may have a column that's called campaign name or lower score. Whatever you have, it's nice to just normalize and say, okay, we are going to use this name of campaign underscore name across all 3. And the same for clicks, the same for impressions, and the same for everything else. You're simply just normalizing the data to make it a little easier to query it and to have some consistency across the different data sources. If you're connecting data from different sources, you may also need some kind of key that connects them, some identifier. This could be perhaps a user ID, maybe like an email, or it could be like an actual user ID, like a persistent database ID. It could be something else. In the case of this Facebook ads component, we could actually look at UTM parameters. So the marketing parameters the Facebook ad provides into a website like UTM campaign or UTM source. Those will be available at the Facebook level, and also be available, let's say, at the Google Analytics level or some other source. Or if you pull in something like a CRM data, like a HubSpot, Salesforce, you're likely going to have them there. So you want to look for your identifiers that are across different sources, and then just note them, as this will be the way you can join data from what can seem like completely separate sources, can usually be combined if you have these identifiers. Next, you want to be able to remove any test data. In the example of Facebook ads, actually, this didn't matter, but you may have some data in front of you that clearly belongs to test users or internal people, maybe your own staff. So be able to find a way to do that. It could be as simple as saying, hey, we have a bunch of emails that contain our domain, our company's domain, so we're going to just filter those out. Or, we have, let's say, sales data, and there's a bunch of deals here that we don't want to look at for this analysis, so we're going to exclude them. Whatever that means, you're just going to add filters to remove the data. And you may also have other data you may want to remove altogether. Let's say, for example, you pulled ad platform data, like in the Facebook ads example, but you also have Google data alongside, but you know that you're only focused on Facebook, so we're going to exclude anything that's Google related. So this cleanup of data is actually quite essential. Typically, if you do the cleanup correctly, the actual analysis, which we're going to see in the next step, is actually quite straightforward, because you're just simply building the formulas or writing the queries, but all your data has been clean. So it's a lot more logical. You're not coming across weird edge cases where, you try to connect two sources, but it doesn't work. So the cleanup stage is where we can say sort of the grunt work, the real magic actually happens. So by the time you get to the next stage, you're ready to go. You're simply writing simple formulas, it brings the data together, it does the analysis, and it's straightforward. But the cleanup almost always needs to happen. And a tool like Funnel.io, which I showed you earlier, the benefit to me in the use case that I mentioned was that it will do the cleanup for me. So I could actually bring the Facebook data, it will normalize it for me, it will clean it, add a couple filters myself and remove those. So it just made that cleanup easier. And if you're using some kind of automated tool to pull from a data source, you may also have those available to you. After all, the ETL component, right, the extract, transform, load, the transform stage is actually where you can actually do some of this cleanup if you so need to, if you want to do it before it kind of ends up at your destination where you want to do it. So it's your choice, but just think about the cleanup and what would make the data easier to work with before you get to the next step. Step number 4, what insights can help guide the decision from step 1? So now we are at the actual analysis stage. You can see there's actually quite a few steps before you even get to the stage, and many steps may actually prevent you from getting here. You may actually have a decision, but you don't have the right data, so there's no point going through it. You may have the decision, you have the data, but the cleanup may just not be feasible for whatever reason. You may not have the skills, it may be too complex, the data may be dirty, and you cannot get there. So these are all steps to ensure that by the time you get here, you're actually able to do the analysis and be able to provide insights into the decision being made. A lot of this work within companies is all about managing expectations. So yes, people may want lots of data to help with lots of decisions, but it just may not be possible. And as someone who may be responsible for data analysis, you need to make sure that the expectations are clear on what you can do and cannot do. That being said, if it's time to do the analysis, then we also have to think about metrics and think about what metrics we may want to show. Now, in the Facebook ads example, a very classic metric in this world is something called ROAS, a return on ad spend. That just simply shows you what kind of return on investment you are receiving from ad spend on platforms like Facebook or Google Ads. We may also, of course, just ROI, which would be there. There are just ad platform metrics related to the performance itself. So we may compare how effective Facebook is at driving conversions compared to Google Ads. That may be part of our comparison. We may compare against organic sources and so forth. If you're not sure of the metrics that would be helpful in this decision, or if you just simply want to double check that you're capturing everything, that's actually pretty straightforward today. We can actually use ChatGPT for that. So here's my ChatGPT. So I'm actually putting the same example I've been using throughout this entire video. The client who's spending is actually 100,000. I'm actually going to make it 10,000. Make it a little easier. 10,000 a month on Facebook ads and increase cost, whatever. And specifically, we want to ask about metrics that may help the decision process. So the helpful thing here is ChatGPT can actually give you some insights into the relevant metrics that you may want to use here and that may be relevant. And again, we saw some of these things just a minute ago, right? We have ROAS, return on ad spend, cost per acquisition, the sort of the efficiency of an ad platform, click-through rate. We can start to see other interesting things like a diminishing return curve is kind of interesting, right? Are we seeing performance drop as the spend increases? Maybe frequency, audience saturations. There's actually a bunch of stuff here that could be quite helpful. LTV, CAC, payback period, and so on, right? So there's, 8, 10 metrics. I may not use them all. I may only use a handful, but this is just really helpful, especially if you find yourself doing analysis on a decision or a field that you're not particularly familiar with. You're not quite sure what are the standard industry metrics that will be helpful here. ChatGPT can actually help you flesh them out. And of course, if you need help with the actual formula, we can even ask that. What is the formula for diminishing return curves? In fact, we just want to ask him, how would you calculate this? So in this case, there is no actual formula for diminishing curve, but it would give us some kind of step-by-step guidance for what we can actually build. So we can see, weekly or daily data. We're going to take ROAS or CPA. We're going to plot that. We do get a bit of a formula for how we build it. And we see the bottom line question. So this kind of makes the analysis much easier now. Now you still have to do the hard work of the decision, getting the data, cleaning the data. But if we're trying to figure out what metrics to put in a report, this can be a great way to figure out exactly what is needed and what metrics you should be aiming for. And of course, how to explain them. When you come back and say, hey, you know what? Here are like the 10 things I looked at. One of those things was the diminishing return curves. Here's what that means. Here's how I calculated it. And here's why you should care. So ChatGPT can actually help you with a lot of that. Lastly, step 5, what's the best way to present the data? So we are now back to close the loop to the decision from step 1. And we're going to present some kind of report to the relevant stakeholders and help them guide through that decision. You can choose, this can be an actual dashboard that you built out. Lots of tools to do that. I'm not going to go into those details. I will mention that for the example I mentioned before, we were using Looker Data Studio. It's a Google product, but again, lots of options, Tableau, Power BI. And of course, you may not need an actual full-blown dashboard. You may just simply want a single report. So you may just simply have a Google Doc where you put all your context, you put different charts, screenshots can be, the charts don't necessarily have to be live or dynamic. You put maybe appendixes that contain the formulas and the logic that you use. Maybe you're linking to the raw data so people can look at that. So that can all be in a single Google Doc, right? And this might be a couple pages, 2, 3, 4 pages. And this allows anyone to quickly glance at what's needed, what's important. And of course, if they want to dive deeper, there's links that allow them to do that. So you're just trying to find a way. And of course, we should also mention that even the report itself may not take place in this form. You may have a slide deck and you may present your insights in a live presentation and then just simply share your slide deck with other people. So you got to figure out what is the right format. I would not get too complex here. There is a point to be made that if you think you might need to repeat this in 3 months or 6 months, or it should be some kind of automated reporting process, you may want to look at something like a persistent dashboard, but don't get too ambitious here. Try to figure out if the analysis resonated, and then you can always kind of go back and sort of fix some things and make them more automated if that's the case. So make a judgment call as to how much effort you want to put in to build a permanent report from this data analysis process. Now, even if you follow this process, it's sometimes hard to know where to even begin if you're just starting your data career or if you're thinking of switching into a data career. In the next video, I'll walk you through exactly what I would do if I was starting fresh in 2025 compared to having 15 years of experience. You'll discover exactly what to learn, what tools, what skills, what you can ignore, and how to make the most out of your data career. Check out the video here on the screen. My name is Ruben Ugarte. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.